Howdy everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while. Have you missed me? It's been ages since I've recorded in front of the camera and talked about books, so thought I should probably do my March wrap up, even though it's basically gonna be May next week. Better late than never, right? Yeah, March was a pretty good reading month. I read 7 books. It was also my birthday in the month of March, so I aged. That's what happened there. Let's just get into it. I don't have a lot of these books with me today because some of them I donated after I read them. Some I had to return because they were library books, and the others I just can't be bothered getting off the shelf and then having to put them away later. So we're going to do the old insert book cover here situation. So the first book that I read in March was Codna for Snow by Jessica Au. This was a book that I got through NetGalley, so thank you to Fitzcarraldo and to NetGalley for allowing me access to that. It's one of those books that I think a lot of people are reading now, and it's becoming quite buzzy, which is good to see because I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. Yeah, I just thought it was the kind of book that has everything that I like in a novel or a story. The characters have some kind of difficult or strained relationship. There's tension there. They travel to a new place, there's art in it, and it takes place over a very short period of time. And those are all things that I've determined that I really enjoy seeing in the stories that I read. So yeah, this one had all of those things, and it was really just a nice way to kind of start a month of reading. If you don't know the premise of this book, it follows a mother and a daughter who are traveling to Tokyo, and they're on holiday, and it's kind of the last holiday that the mother will probably be able to go on as she kind of gets older, and the young daughter is really trying to make sure that this holiday goes well. There's this real sense of like roles being switched around. The daughter kind of takes on this very caring and this caregiver, this caring position. You know, she is kind of dictating what happens and the itinerary, and the mother is very much just like allowing this to happen. Yeah, it was a really kind of ethereal book. Lots of moments that were quite fleeting and mention or remembering of the past for the daughter who's narrating the story, and as she's kind of associating things that they're seeing, things that they're doing with her past memories, and a lot of those kind of thoughts and ideas that she's having, that they're quite ephemeral and hard to grasp, but it kind of adds to that mood of the book, which I also really enjoyed. Next I read Whai by Nicole Titihuia Hawkins. This is a collection of poetry written by a Māori poet, and this was actually a recommendation from someone on either here or Instagram, I can't quite remember, but yeah, someone recommended this to me and I really loved it. It felt like a collection of poetry about what it means to be a young Māori woman growing up in contemporary New Zealand, and how kind of weird that is, this idea of the kind of two worlds we straddle. She weaves a lot of traditional Māori concepts, ideas into her poetry that is very contemporary and of today's time. It's funny and really highlights that Māori wit that I think is very specific to what I've known growing up. It's really quite comforting to read something so specific and so familiar. It really feels like having access to something that others don't quite understand. The collection kind of is very much steeped in a lot of the beautiful aspects of it, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. Next I read Something New Under the Sun by Alexandra Kleeman. Now I read this as a buddy read with Jessica from Jessica's Book Stack on Instagram, and we were going to do this as our next boozy book chat, but neither of us really enjoyed it all that much. So we're thinking we're going to try and pair it with a novel that we both will enjoy about kind of climate crisis, climate disaster, and see if we can kind of redeem it somehow, because yeah, spoiler alert, I didn't enjoy it. I gave it a 2.5 star, which to me is just like, it was, you know, okay, it's like half of 5 stars. So the more I think about it and the more I try to think about what were the redeeming qualities or what did I like about the book, it was really hard to determine anything. It just felt too much, and I could kind of see some of the ideas and I understood a lot of it, but I just don't think it was executed in the best possible way. This is a kind of climate crisis disaster novel that satires Hollywood, and it touches on themes of capitalism and the commercialization of natural resources. It's a lot to fit into one book. I'm not going to criticize it for that, because I've read books recently that have had a lot going on and have done it so well. I just don't think that the ways that she has used characters or tried to convey these messages around these topics was successful. It felt very monologue-y, but there was nothing to quite capture the reader's attention in those moments, and I just found myself becoming very bored, just like not wanting to read pages and pages and pages of descriptions of nature and dying landscape. There's like 2 storylines running. The main character, Patrick, I think his name was, he is a writer. He's written a memoir which is being adapted into a TV show. He has gone to LA to see this kind of come to fruition. He is struggling with the whole idea of his story being lost, or his kind of creative thing not being represented the way he wants it to. The other storyline is his wife, who we find out has had some kind of breakdown about climate change and the fact that the world around us is kind of slowly dying. She has taken their daughter to a commune on the East Coast, kind of like, upstate New York, I think, and there is with this community that acknowledges and mourns the death of everything in the natural world, and it's kind of like this place where she feels like she can go and people understand what she's going through. So those are the kind of 2 storylines. I don't really understand why there needed to be 2 storylines, because it was actually just quite distracting from, I think, what was mainly happening, which was with Patrick, the husband. Even though I found the wife's storyline much more interesting and would have liked to have spent the time there, I think there should have been 2 separate stories almost, or it could have been formatted in a different way. where you got more concentrated doses of each instead of like cutting between. Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about that one. Next I woke up this morning, The Definitive Oral History of The Sopranos, which is actually like a book of the podcast that Michael Imperioli and Steve Schirripa host, who are two actors from The Sopranos. This book is kind of like the best bits from that podcast series that they did, and it's a book for super fans of the show, people who like behind the scenes stuff. If you are someone who, after watching a TV series, likes to Google every part of the show and you want to know more, this is definitely a book that I would recommend. I also listened to this on audio as I was reading it, and it kind of helped with the whole experience because a lot of it is just conversations between Michael and Steve and the guests that they have on their podcast, which, you know, are actors from the show, the creator, David Chase. They have the casting directors of episodes, the writers, the wardrobe, stunt people. Like, they talk to a massive range of people for this podcast, and it kind of just gives you this even deeper appreciation for a show that anyone who's seen it, I know, loves it. I think it really just celebrates kind of the genius that was that show, that is that show, and I guess highlights how, I don't want to say groundbreaking because that sounds weird, but it was like a TV show that was doing things completely different to what typical TV looked like at that time. Steve Schirripa plays Bobby Bacala, who is my favorite character from the Sopranos series ever, and yeah, I just loved it so much. Those two riff off each other really well. They give each other shit. It's just like they're really good friends, but you could tell they have a lot of fun getting to talk about something that was like a big part of their lives for a long time. So yeah, definitely recommend. Then I read Too Much and Not the Mood by Durga Bose, which it's probably one of my favorite books so far this year. Definitely my favorite kind of like essay collection, non-fiction. I absolutely loved every moment of reading that book, which is really, you know, it's not an easy thing for an essay collection. Usually you have favorites where you have some that you take more from than others, but just everything about it I loved. The title of the book, Too Much and Not the Mood, is taken from a diary entry made by Virginia Woolf. She wrote that out of frustration from feeling as though all writing was at the time was having to edit, rewrite herself to make it more entertaining for the reader. This collection feels like a response to that, but for the opposite side. The idea that if you let a writer kind of meander and digress from, you know, where they first start, that your experience as a reader is going to be richer. It just feels so generous. Like, she does this thing where she's giving us everything, but it is still so thoughtful. Although it does wander, it doesn't feel chaotic. It is just this really stunning look at her life and what it means to grow up brown in Canada, what it means to be the daughter of immigrant parents. She revisits a lot of these themes just continually throughout. She talks beautifully about what living alone is and how it is this act of kind of perfecting oneself through the repetition of tasks, like everyday tasks. She writes about these things in such a beautiful way, and I just loved it so much. It's definitely a book collection that I will be revisiting and kind of using it to feed my soul. It was just beautiful. Yeah, oh, stunning. Next I read today A Woman Went Mad in the Supermarket by Hilma Wolitzer. This is a collection of short stories. Hilma Wolitzer was a writer quite prevalent in the late 50s, 60s, 70s. She wrote a lot for newspapers and had a lot of her work published there. So this is a collection that's been put together as a way of kind of reintroducing her to a younger audience. I was sent this by Allen and Unwin, and it's out by Bloomsbury. It was an okay collection. Like, I enjoyed it as a whole because of the stories that it told. It focuses on a couple, a married couple, and we kind of journey throughout their marriage together at different points. A lot of the stories are quite humorous and absurd, but they mostly focus on kind of everyday mundane tasks or life. Really examines them and pulls out little aspects of them to kind of focus on and think about what it must be like for this couple. That idea of having the whole collection be about one couple, I think, was helpful because you became invested in them. By the end, the last story of the collection was written in 2020 as a response to kind of COVID times, and I think they did it really well. It kind of sums up this couple's life together. It was kind of like visiting old relatives that you don't get to see much, and each time you see them they've got a crazy story to share. Yeah, I would recommend perhaps just reading it more like a novel and not so much like individual stories. Okay, the last book that I read in March was Stoner by John Williams. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I think a little bit like the short story collection by Hilma Wolitzer. It's a novel about just a single person's life. The idea that unremarkable people can be written about and their lives can be examples of how to do things or how not to do things. It's a very sad story that is frustrating at times as we watch this person kind of passively let life happen to them and doesn't really do anything about it. Stoner is about a man named William Stoner. He grows up in Missouri. He comes from a working family. They work on the farm. You know, it's a hard life. He is offered the opportunity to study at university, and he goes. Initially he's there to do horticulture, but there he discovers his love for the English language and starts to pursue a career in academia. He is offered a position at the university that he has studied at, and he kind of stays there for the rest of his life. He has a marriage that he is very unhappy in. One of the most miserable aspects of the book is his marriage to Edith. His relationship with his daughter is not great, and he kind of doesn't really have a lot of close friends to turn to, and so it's very unremarkable kind of life. The language and the way that John Williams is able to write things so exactly, so precisely, so unflowery. Like, the language is very matter of fact. It reminds me a lot of Natalia Ginsburg. I know that's a weird comparison, but I just found with her writing, it was very void of emotion, but yet carried so much within that because of the exacting way it describes things. I think once you take a lot of those emotive words out of writing, there is still that sense of everything becoming quite dry and bleak almost as enhanced, which was just perfect for the story. I really did enjoy it, even though it's seemingly a book about a very kind of sad sad life, but it was great. I loved it. Okay, that's all the books that I read in March. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully that was good. Hopefully this made sense. I haven't spoken about books in a long time, so I'm a little rusty. Yeah, let me know what you read in March. What was your favourite read? If you've read any of these books, have any thoughts, opinions to share, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. And I will see you pretty soon for an April wrap up, because I'm not going to leave it as long as I did this one. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Ka kite.